What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Got on a good friend of the show. It's been a while, but welcome back, Mr. Colts Law, Lawrence Owen himself. Lawrence, thanks for coming on, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Can't wait for training camp to start, just like you. Looking forward to going out there, seeing these guys actually in pads, practicing and stuff. And one of the things that we've had to sit here and think about for the last few weeks in between, OTAs and mini camp and now training camp is what are we going to expect and how much these guys are going to impact the team, especially the new guys. So this whole five indispensable Colts that we're doing here, that's really fun. I'm caught me off guard, and I was really excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I have to admit, this isn't an original idea at all. This is one that Kevin Bowen does every year. I'd never done it before, so I was like, hey, this is something that would be really cool to do without really looking at his list or anything. I was just thinking who are the five most indispensable Colts, if I was talking about. Now, I know, Lawrence, you took it a step further. You didn't go just players. You added a coach in there, which is awesome. And it's interesting because – I think there's a couple different ways you can view this term indispensable, Lawrence. I was just looked up the definition. It means absolutely necessary. That's kind of like the, definition it gives when you just look it up online. So that's the way that I kind of view it is I view necessary as the player's performance, obviously. How good of a player are they to the team and how big of a loss would they be? But I also kind of view it as their position. How important is their position? And so because of that, I think I think we both agreed we're probably going to omit the rookies just because you haven't seen them on a football field yet as a pro. And it would be just probably a little bit unfair at this point to, really throw them out there. I know originally when I thought about it, I was like, do I throw out guys like Richardson, Brents, who might play a lot? It's just hard to right now. So just for the sake of it, we're just not going to do that. But Lawrence, kind of talk to me. I know because we kind of have a little bit of we vary a little bit on how we define indispensable. So how would you define indispensable? And then we can get into your list as well.
When I look at indispensable, I look at it as, hey, these are guys that would be very difficult or impossible to replace on the team, right? They are indispensable. If they're not on your team is going to suffer greatly. Because you're not going to be able to find a replacement to equal or even come close to what production that they are putting on the field. So they are indispensable in that manner. That's how I look at it.
Okay. Gotcha. So position doesn't necessarily matter as much as can you replace them? How hard is it to replace them? So
exactly.
Okay, gotcha. Awesome. Well, Lawrence, let's get into the list here. Who would be your first guy here that you would view as one of the five most indispensable Colts here?
Oh, with me, there's no question, Jonathan Taylor. He tops my list. Without Jonathan Taylor, there is no offense on this team. We're probably bottom tier offense in the NFL, right? I mean, come on, let's face it, right? The man does everything. And he's one of those guys, not only can you hand it to him 30 times a game, but even in the fourth quarter, if you might be up by 3 against the New England Patriots and you need one more score to put it away, but you're 72 yards away. What do? You hand it to Jonathan Taylor because he could take it to the house at any time. So I look at Jonathan Taylor as a guy, yes, I get, people look at, oh, well, the running back position's dime a dozen, but the talent isn't, right? That talent, you're not going to be able to easily replace, if at all, the talent that Jonathan Taylor brings to this offense. And you take him off the team and you could probably add a couple more losses to whatever loss total we have this season, just for not having Jonathan Taylor on the team, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think people would use the argument, well, look what Zach Moss did. He had 3 or 4 games over 70 yards and stuff like that. And also I could see the argument, which it's funny, Lawrence, because originally I actually omitted Jonathan Taylor from this list, and I was like, that was a bad idea after thinking about it, because you're right, he is the offense. But the argument that I used was Jonathan Taylor had an incredible season in 2021, at the end of the day, you still miss the playoffs despite how great Jonathan Taylor was. And it
Mm-hmm.
just does come down to the running back position. I think that's the main argument against, the value of a running back as good as he is. And it's unfortunate that it's gotten to that point. I mean, we've seen all these different guys, just recently Josh Jacobs and, some of those other guys. It's just like the running back position is so devalued in today's NFL. It's actually kind of crazy. But
Yep.
when it comes to Jonathan Taylor, I have him on my list as well, just because you're right. I mean, he is the offense for Indianapolis this season. I mean, the offense is going to run through him, despite who's out there at quarterback. And, a rookie quarterback's best friend is a good running game. So that's definitely going to be a big help to Richardson when he gets out there, and just going to help take some pressure off of him early. So I think for that reason alone, that makes him so valuable to how he's going to just help Anthony Richardson out right away from that standpoint. So I think Jonathan Taylor certainly belongs on this list. And I'm sure people will debate, how high is he on this list? Is he 5? Is he 1? We're not going to get into necessarily how we rank them, but we'll leave that up to the comment section. I'm sure some people will throw out their thoughts there. But another guy, Lawrence, that I know we both had on our list was DeForest Buckner. I mean, I think for the reason of, the 3 technique, it's a pretty valuable position. DeForest Buckner is one of the best in the NFL. And also, really, Lawrence, you don't have a key backup right now that you can fully identify and say, if Buckner was out for whatever reason, this guy would, be there and play at any sort of level, even close to what Buckner puts out there.
Oh no! I mean, look, we're paying him $20 million a year for a reason, right? And this guy is someone who takes on double and triple teams on a consistent basis and still consistently gets pressures, right? We were a top 10 sack team last year. Buckner didn't get double digits. We didn't have any double digit sacks. The reason why we were double digit, why we were top 10 sacks, heck, I think we were top 3 right up until week 13 or something like that, was because our defensive line was able to get pressure on the quarterbacks and make them move. And then, as we talk about a lot, cleanup sacks, right? May not be able to get home, but he's able to always get in the backfield. It seems like even on double and triple teams, create havoc, helps out our run defense. Could you imagine what our run defense would be like if DeForest Buckner wasn't there? I mean, it's unbelievable how much he does for this team on the defense. So, yeah, DeForest Buckner is an A1 guy. It would be very difficult, if not impossible, to replace a DeForest Buckner if he went down or if he just wasn't on the team at all.
Yeah, for sure. And, he does a lot of things that you do see, but also he does a lot of those things, like you said, that you just don't see and you don't really appreciate till you fully dive into the tape and be like, wow, Buckner's still got it. He's still, disrupting. And, because of what he does, that's not seen a lot of the other guys, you get to see what they do, because of DeForest Buckner taking those double, triple teams or whatever. That definitely helps free up some of those free rushers and stuff like that. So Buckner definitely deserves to be on this list. Now, Lawrence, I know we have a couple other players that we might differ on just slightly. Who is your next player here?
I'm going to go DSL, Darius Leonard. And the reason why I say this is we've already seen what our defense is like without him, okay? When he's on the field, every year that he has played, we have been a top 10 turnover team in the league defensively. The 1 year we weren't, we were a bottom 5, okay? That right there, that ability right there by itself to flip the turnover ratio for a defense makes that guy indispensable. You can't replace him. He's impossible to replace. He's a top 3 linebacker in the NFL, sideline to sideline, can cover, can tackle, but most importantly is able to create turnovers and keeps the defense on its toes. He's called a maniac for a reason. You just aren't going to go out there and 5 and dime a guy that would easily replace Darius Leonard in any way, shape, or form. Can you plug a guy in there to fill the position role? Maybe, but he brings more than just the position to the field when he's out there on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right there. I was tempted to put the guy who filled in for him last year, Zaire Franklin, and I almost put him on this list, but I have to agree with you. As I kind of heard you talking about it, I actually just flipped and I'm going to go Shaq as well, just because, like you talked about, just the turnovers, all that stuff you mentioned. I mean, it's unparalleled. And as good as Zaire played last year, I mean, there's just not a player in this league that can create turnovers quite like Shaq Leonard. Certainly not on the roster. So as good as Zaire was last year, and I'm excited that he's continuing to get his role expanded. I definitely think you're going to miss Shaq if he's not out there. And even though the defense played well, the turnovers just weren't what they usually were, and it was very evident at times. You never felt like you had that player that out there would go and make that play to win the game. How many times did you see Shaq Leonard force a fumble at the end of the game to win? I mean, gosh, I think of that Raider game a couple of years ago, the Houston game where if that doesn't happen, Houston probably beats you in that game. And so Shaq's just so valuable in what he does. And so if he can get back out there, I mean, that just changes the whole complexion of your defense altogether.
I mean, he played what, 3 drives and at 70% maybe, and he still got an interception. I mean, come on, that's the kind of player you're getting from Shaquille Leonard.
Absolutely. So Shaquille Leonard definitely deserves to be on this list. Hopefully he can come back and be 100%. I'm all for him taking as long as he needs, man, because if he can get out there and be near or at 100%, I mean, it's worth it. So definitely think he's a guy that deserves to be on this list. Now, here's a guy, Lawrence, that I don't think you'll agree with, but I think just because of going back to kind of my earlier argument, just like you don't really have anybody else that's proven at this point. I think Michael Pittman is a guy that he has gotten just drugged through the dirt all offseason. Didn't have a great year last year, but Lawrence, he still led you in targets and receptions by a wide margin last year in the last couple of years. And he's a guy that was an ascending player going in to last year. And so, there's a lot going on. Obviously, Pittman had some fault in that, but, there was just this, just constant carousel at quarterback last year. You didn't have a playbook, it seemed like, for half the season offensively. So I think Michael Pittman Jr., for a lot of people, they've kind of written him off and said, no, he's not that good. But I think a lot of people have forgotten how big he was in 2021, all the big plays that he made. I mean, he was the most consistent guy out there week in and week out at the receiving corps. And so I think now, working with Reggie Wayne, getting in kind of a new offensive scheme, I feel like Michael Pittman's, has kind of been the forgotten man in certain ways. And I think he has a chance here to kind of continue to be that leader. And I think if you would lose Michael Pittman, I know some people would say it's not that big of a loss. I personally, Lawrence, think it's a bigger loss than people are giving it credit for, because Pittman's been your leading receiver. He's by far your most experienced guy out there in terms of, the receptions and just the things he's done on the field. And, he's been basically, if he had 30, 40 yards more last year, he's a back-to-back 1,000-yard receiver. So for me, Michael Pittman is on that list. Who would be your next guy?
Well, real quick, Michael Pittman missed my list barely. All right. He'd be right on the outside edge. Okay. So I do believe he is an indispensable guy. I just feel like there are other people that it would be harder to replace than Michael Pittman. Just barely. Just barely. My next guy would be Grover Stewart. Okay. This dude sitting beside DeForest Buckner, with those two on the field, they're arguably the best 1-2 punch at defensive tackle in the league, right? We've seen what Grover can do. He can take over the game at times. We saw an entire drive just killed by Grover Stewart by snap after snap after snap. End of it, every play was made by him, right? Sack, tackle for loss, sack. Just it's devastating what Grover Stewart can do. And with him and DeForest Buckner sitting there side by side, their ability to control the inside line of scrimmage, right in the middle, which is by far, in my opinion, the most important position, the most important place on the entire field to control, is that middle of the line of scrimmage. because that's where all the action is. That's where the running back's getting the handoff. That's where the quarterback is taking the snap and all of that. So you control that, and wow, you have a very good chance of controlling the outcome of each play, let alone each game. So Grover Stewart is a guy who's very, again, if he comes off the field, who's replacing him, right? Who are you going to replace him with? This dude he lost 20 pounds a couple years ago just to get a little bit quicker, but still has the power that he had when he was 20 pounds heavier. This dude is a monster, and I love everything that he brings on the field, and I hope that we see Stewart and Buckner together for years to come on this team.
Yeah, absolutely. Grover's definitely an underrated player, but he has just been so consistent the last couple of years. So, yeah, hopefully he does get extended and he can be on the team for the next couple of years at least. So, definitely think he's a guy. And then I believe we both have one more, Lawrence, if I'm not mistaken. My guy I have to talk about, it's actually funny, we're both going to go offensive line here. I'm actually going to go Bernhard Ryman, and I know that might be a little bit of a surprise, but I think I look at it kind of like this, Lawrence. Bernhard Ryman, yes, I know he's only played one season. I fully understand that. But left tackle is a position that's so hard to find, a quality left tackle. And again, he may not be that, but I just think for, how he looked at the end of the season, given the circumstances he was given, how important left tackle is, how bad he would fail to address it for like a couple of years. I just think he's so indispensable and so valuable just because of the position that he plays. And I guess I'm probably projecting a little bit more about like what I think he will become this year. And I admit that, there's probably some other players that I could throw on here on the offensive line that have proven a little bit more. But for that reason, that's kind of why I have Ryman over into the other offensive linemen, just because it's so critical to protect your quarterback, especially a rookie quarterback. And I just think Ryman, he's put on 10 to 15 pounds of muscle. If he can, if that can translate well, I think he's going to be so valuable for years to come. And he's going to be cheap for a couple of years, which is definitely a bonus.
To back up your argument a little bit on Ryman, you are right. If the season started today and Ryman could not play, the Colts would be in dire straits, right? Who would go there? It would be like last year all over again. The beginning of the year, it would be awful. And you'd be putting your rookie quarterback and or Gardner Minshew in serious jeopardy, right, throughout the entire season. So in that aspect, if he goes down or if he can't play, then absolutely he's indispensable in that position at that point right now. I'm not saying that his play level can't be replaced, say, next year by somebody else if he cannot improve and become better. But at the same time, right now, yeah, with how Chris Ballard has went out and used the offseason, Ryman is indispensable this season. I get where you're coming from on that. I got two guys that are kind of tied. One of
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and say my offensive lineman first. That's Quentin Nelson. And the reason I say Quentin Nelson, right guard's not indispensable. His leadership is. His ability to make things happen on and off the field is. The fact that he could walk up to the GM and be like, we ain't got enough, and it sways the GM to go out and do stuff. Name another player on our team that has that kind of pull, right? With the brass. Quentin Nelson is a guy that when he talks, people listen. And it's not just that, as an offensive line. He leads by example. We saw last year, was it last year or the year before, when he had no, it was a year before, I think, when he had the foot injury, and he was out there like coaching guys with the boot on, and he was walking out there with the boot on, coaching guys that were his replacements for that, preseason and stuff, teaching them how to do the things correctly. And you don't see players like that all the time, especially guys that are set. They know their job is secure. They're not out there helping everybody all the time. You hear top end quarterback saying it's not my job to coach these kids up that are behind me. And Nelson don't care about that. And that's why I feel like he's indispensable, not just from his play on the field, but how he carries himself and his pull on and off the field as well makes him very indispensable with this team. I want to bring up, if we're going to go Colts and not just players, I want to say Reggie Wayne is indispensable. All right. Second year as a full-time wide receivers coach on a team that is loaded with a bunch of young guys that are basically blank canvases that he has to work with, right? Without him and his knowledge and his ability and the fact that he has learned from a year of being there, without that, how do these guys become better throughout the season? Because that's what we're looking for, right? Our wide receiver corps got to get better all the way around, all of them. So he is indispensable right now because of his position on the team to make that core, all those guys, play better than what they did the year before.
Yep. Absolutely. I'm glad you caught that. I'm glad you went with a coach because, Reggie Wayne. I mean, I thought the receivers, out of anybody in the offense last year, I felt like the receivers were probably the best, honestly. And unfortunately, they were, some of it was a product of just bad quarterback play. So, but guys, let us know your thoughts overall on these. Thank you, Lawrence, for coming on. I appreciate it. Guys, let us know your thoughts on the most indispensable Colts for 2023. That'll do it for this one. Thanks, guys, so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.